another thing that's really nice to know is the distort and transform options. So these are starting to get to the more complex portion of Illustrator because we've already gotten that basic toolkit of making lines and other things under our belt. Now we can start doing a little more unique things. So we can start by just making a very simple line here. So again, slash tool, I just made a very simple line. A thing that you can start doing is, well, how do I get a perfect zigzag? How do I get a perfect sinusoidal wave? What normally throws people off if they were trying to get a nice sine wave, they're like, well, I know the pen tool exists, so I can come over here, I can do that, I can do this. This is really challenging. I don't know what I'm doing. This is really frustrating. It's looking really rough. Really just not the desirable way to do this. The other option to get a perfect sine wave, like you're showing excitation of a fluorophore, you've got high wavelength light coming in and then emitting even longer wavelength light. You can come in here, you can just start by drawing a simple line. We come down to effect, and then it should be the distort and transform option. And then we come down to zigzag. So we can click on that. And now you'll notice I've got a nice, perfectly zigzagging pattern here. And I have control over pretty much everything about this zigzag, like the size. I can change the height of the peaks of the zigzags. It can be relative, absolute, etc. But another thing, I can make more ridges, I can make fewer ridges and whatnot. Really play around with it. It doesn't really matter that much. But what I really want you to know is that smooth is another option here. So as opposed to a rigid zigzag, I can come over here and click smooth. And now I've got perfect sinusoidal waves. If I'm trying to show something like light-based excitation coming in, we can even do that right now. So let's say I want to make a cell. I've got, that's a box. I make a cell. I want to swap stroke and fill. I want just like a little green cell. And then I want to show coming in with high wavelength or high frequency light. And then I know that I want to have longer wavelength light get emitted. So I'll start with 2. We'll change this over. Let's say we excite with like a magenta, make that fatter to easier to see. Same with this guy. And then I leave with like blue, just to make it easy to see. Come over here, effect, distort and transform, zigzag. And I want to do ridges per segment. I want to make this pretty high, do 8, smooth. And then I do this guy, again, effect, distort and transform. Same idea, smooth. And then I just want to make it a little obvious to the viewer, make that 5. And then I can, if I wanted to, have that, play around with this, doesn't really matter. Another option that's also important to note, if I go back to outline mode, Command or Control Y, it's still just 2 straight lines. Again, these are effects that are applied to lines. Under the hood, it's still a line. Well, how do I make this real, so to speak? How do I actually make this a shape? Well, we already did that with our little blood vessel things. So we know, let's say I'm kind of happy with this. I'm not ready for a design lock, but I do like this. I'm going to move it, copy, paste in place, move it all down, and I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to say, hey, I like these 2 shapes. I want to object, expand appearance, and then do the same on this one, object, expand appearance. So when I go, we'll actually need to do that twice, I think, because it's interesting. Expand, fill and stroke, that's totally fine. So we actually had to take an effect and expand it, and then expand, stroke and fill. So you actually had to do it twice there. It can also throw people off. But now when we hit outline mode, Command or Control Y, now I can actually turn these things and use them as shapes. So again, expanding appearance, it took what was a line that I had applied an effect to. I expanded it, actually had to expand it twice to make it something where, let's say, just fooling around, just showing what we can do in Illustrator. I got this, and then I go to Shape Builder tool, Shift M, and I can like cut these things out, and now I have, it's all editable like a shape. If I try to do that up here, and I just have this block, and I try and do Shape Builder tool, it's gonna say like, that's not a shape, I can't do anything with that. So this is why people easily get confused, understandably so, in Illustrator. There's a difference between something being a line or a basic shape with an effect applied to it. These look very similar, but to Illustrator they're not. So this is a line with an effect applied to it. I had to go through the process of expanding the shape to make it a real shape from which I could then start editing it. So huge idea there in Illustrator is, but what were we doing? We were combining a lot of things together. Copy, paste in place, move in orthogonal increments, working non-destructively, coming in here, expanding appearance, we just talked about that. Hey, I actually have to do expand again. Stroke and fill is totally fine. So I like this. Maybe I want to move that down again and keep editing it. But all you're doing is you're establishing this non-destructive chain of working together that makes it so much easier to go back and edit or change a color or change the shape or something when you wanted to. So for example, if I wanted to, I can come back in, I can change, I have the appearance panel again, zigzag, and let's say I wanted to add like a few more. I only wanted to do 7, working non-destructively. The second I come down here and I have this thing as a path, it's just a shape now. I can't go back and I can't change the ridges and the segments and the smoothness and all that stuff, but it's not that big a deal because it's right here. I have a clone of it right up top. They're like, let's make the size a little different, let's change the ridges per segment. Working non-destructively is how you save a lot of time. So this is the best process for iterating within Illustrator. Orthogonal increments, copying. If I wanted this can easily just shift right up there and boom, everything's aligned based on what I changed. So you don't have to even align these things with the align panel that we talked about. As long as everything was in orthogonal increments, I can move really quickly and start editing different versions of this thing very, very quickly. So that was the distort and transform option. Another thing that's nice is this option. It's kind of like blending, or this almost looks like a derivative, but I think it's pretty neat and nice to know that it exists. So we'll start by drawing a line. So this is the transform tool. So I have just a simple line here, and I want to make something that looks like a derivative, something kind of cool. I do not have to come in here and manually draw, every single line here where there's going to be imperfections. It's going to take a lot of time. I just select my line. I go to Effect, Distort and Transform, Transform. So when I click on that, and it looks like nothing happened because we haven't really changed anything yet, I can link my horizontal and vertical scaling. But what this is going to do is it's basically going to iterate through a number of copies based off of what I tell it. So right now, you'll notice I have 0 copies. Let's make that 5 for right now. And it still doesn't really look like much has changed. The reason for that is nothing in here has been told to be edited yet. So if I come in and I say, I want you to change this, I want you to change the scale a little bit, again, 105 each time. And then I also want you to move, let's do plus 1 pixel horizontally and 2 vertically. And then I also want to change the angle with each iteration. I can come in and do something like this. Let's do, using my scroll wheel. Again, you can see if I want more copies, I just tell it 7. I can come up here, use the scroll wheel. I can keep doing this. So every generation, what is happening for every single copy? Every copy, based off of how I've made this, is 105% bigger in either direction. It's moved a little bit in the X and Y direction, and it's rotated slightly. So this is how you can just start to make things very, very quickly. It's nice to know about. I don't use it all the time, but at least knowing that the transform tool is there is neat. So let's say I like this. And keep in mind, what have we been going over with lots of these things in Illustrator? This is still a line, outline mode, Control Y. It's still a line. It just has an effect applied to it. So we'll move that up here. And let's say I like this. I wanted to make something, actually we could just use this guy right here. Even delete him, it's the same idea. I like this guy. I want to move him here, and I want to make it real. I don't just want to have a line with an effect applied to it. I want to be able to edit it, again, expand appearance. Now I have like 6 different lines, 7 different lines that I can come in. They will be grouped Control Shift G ungroups them, and now I have a single individually editable thing. So again, that idea, work non-destructively, it's just an appearance applied to a line right here. I copied it over, and now I have something that I can edit, and I can make these things, different line weights. Let's say I know I want to change, let's make like this line weight different. Let's make this one even thinner. It doesn't really matter. Knowing that that ability is there and knowing what's going on is, it's a line, it just has an effect applied to it. Come over here. If I like this, and I want to keep editing it even further, I can expand the appearance. By expanding the appearance, I now have options that I didn't have before. I've actually made these lines real. So this line doesn't actually exist over here, but it does after I've expanded it. So again, that's why I mentioned expand appearance, kind of a game changer, really, really nice to know about. This is perhaps my favorite tool in Illustrator right now. It's called the blend tool. Big overlap between this and designers. I think designers use this a lot for making very cool visual effects. And I will go over how scientists can use the blend tool immensely effectively in Illustrator. So in short, the blend tool is telling Illustrator to interpolate something. So what I did, I just drew, the same blue square, purple circle from up top. What the blend tool does is really, really neat. I'll shift these off to the side for now. I'll just copy these guys and shift them down. And what I want you to do, and this is why blend tool is confusing, is it requires basically a two-step process. Not super user-friendly, but once you learn it, man, is it cool. I'll go to Object, Blend, and then Blend Options. So this brings up the option, do I want to do smooth color? Do I want to have it, aligned to the page? Play around with these things, not a big deal. We'll go to this drop-down menu. We can go to specified steps. So this is like specified number of interpolations. We'll just do 2, and then we'll tell it okay. And nothing happened. And people are thinking, well, what? I hit the blend tool. Why is nothing there? It's because it's a confusing 2-step process. You come down, object, blend, and then make. That's why people frequently get hung up on the blend tool. Not very user-friendly for beginners. But again, these are just 2 shapes. There's an effect applied, and it's just telling you there's a line between them. These 2 interpolated shapes don't exist yet. Well, we know how we would make those real, right? We know that if we come up to Object, Expand, Object and Fill, well, would you look at that? Now I actually have these things to edit. They're grouped in a family, ungroup them, Control Shift G, and now I can edit this one alone. So this is why having a good foundation is really important for using Illustrator's more complicated features, is knowing how to ungroup things, how to expand appearances, that I can come over to the transform tool and I can either do that to change certain things, where I can, if I particularly do a blend options, and if I want 2 more, I can come in here and it starts to bleed together. Doesn't really matter. If I had, for example, let's go back here. If I had something else that I wanted to do, so I can come Object, Blend Options. Let's say if I do like 200, what does that do? It basically makes it a really smooth line. And again, let's say I'm interested in working with this. Work non-destructively. Paste in place, move orthogonal increments. And I want to change the shape of this circle. I can double click, and now all I'm doing is within that group. I've got this one focused. You can kind of tell by this thick green border now on my screen. I can come in here and I can change that shape. Again, I'm holding Alt and Shift to scale evenly from the center. If I let go of Alt, it'll scale evenly. And if I hold Alt, it'll do it the other way. So if I hold Shift and Alt, scaling proportionately, changing that, escape. But again, it's still just a square and a circle. If I wanted to make it real, so to speak, copy, paste in place, bleeding over this a little bit, doesn't matter. Expand, sure, and then boom, I have a ton of circles and squares. I can fuse them with Pathfinder or something. And, I lose the gradient, but the idea is there. Just keep in mind, it's not real until you expand it. The benefit of having it not be locked in is that I can edit this. Let's say I wanted to shift this thing around. I can come in here, I can shift where this thing is. So you can either have it be easily editable or you can have it be real and like change the color and shapes and stuff. But you really can't have your cake and eat it too in Illustrator currently. So what is the usefulness of the blend tool practically for making a figure? There are two particular ones. One is huge. I'll give the primary example of using blends first. Blends are going to allow you to make perfect color palettes, even if they're one-off color palettes for a graph. So let's say I had an experiment and I ran this experiment at different temperatures. I started at like ambient room temperature being this light blue that I like, and I've got something that was run basically at freezing at this dark blue temperature. And I want to have all these, 5 different lines or whatever on my graph be different shades of blue to correspond with decreasing temperature or whatever that I'm running this experiment at. What people typically will do, again, they'll come over here, maybe they're going to try and make, let's say, 6 or so different colors. What you do not want to do is say, well, I'll come over here, I'll hold shift and then click to bring up the more complex panel. And I'll try and find one. That one's pretty good. I'll do the next one. That's okay. And then maybe this one, like there. That looks okay, but it's not perfect. And it's definitely not this shade of blue. So we can actually delete all of these things and we'll just use the blend tool. Remember, what does the blend tool do? It just tells Illustrator to interpolate something. I don't really care that these are squares. I care about the color in this case. So object, blend options. We'll do 6. We'll have a total of 8. We'll do OK. Nothing happened because we didn't make it blend yet. The command is Alt-Control-B. I know that seems random, but I blend all the time, so I know Alt-Control-B, and boom. I've got perfectly interpolated colors. And again, it's even editable. So I can come in here, and if I wanted to, I can move this square, get myself a little bit more spacing, move that square. The challenge, again, people forget all the time, this is just an effect applied to 2 shapes. So what do? If I like this enough, I can come up here, object, expand. They are still grouped. Control-Shift-G to ungroup them. In the span of 15 seconds, I have made a perfectly linear blue gradient for my different lines on my graph. So this will be a color palette for a graph for whatever that I'm trying to make. So when I was establishing the style guide, for example, you'll see a lot of these colors. Some of these I just made by using the blend tool. So the blend tool can let you make perfect color palettes. A case in which we'd actually use the blend tool directly in a figure, I had a friend come to me and he said, we had this experiment, we injected a cell with fluid, and we basically observed what happened inside of the cell as it was injected with like a high salt solution or something. And what he was saying was, well, I know that I have the cell at rest, and I know that I have the shape of the cell when it was swollen after being injected, but my advisor wants me to make this interim cell that as it was swelling, because we want to show a mechanism that's happening inside of the cell as it's responding to a new osmotic stress. How would I do that? Well, I've already drawn 2 different cells, cell 1 pre-injection, cell 2 post-injection. We can highlight these guys and just do object, blend options, and let's only do 1. And then make, and Illustrator properly interpolates size and color so that this little cell in here is perfectly interpolated between A and C. If, say, your advisor comes and they say, let's actually add in not just an A, B, C, but I want to do like A, B, C, and D, like, it's no problem. I worked non-destructively. So I come back here, object, blend options. Let's add in 1 more cell, and now you're good to go. You did not have to spend the time of making a bespoke cell by eye. You just let Illustrator interpolate it perfectly for you. So this is how the blend tool is pretty cool. I think it's a little difficult to use directly in a figure. The best use of the blend tool to me is making perfect and beautiful color palettes for whatever you want at the drop of a hat. So that's what the blend tool is great for. As a side note, you can also have something like a blend replace spine. So we could take this thing down here. Let's just draw with a pen tool something kind of crazy. We can give it a shape. So we'll give it a stroke. We can have this be like that. And then I can highlight those two things, object, blend, replace spine. And it's good to know about, pretty rarely used, but kind of a cool little thing. So you can have a pretty crazy shape. The last thing that I want to touch upon is this idea of pattern brushes. I know that before, very early on, we had made a little endothelial cell, or a cartoonized one, up here. All I've done is I've taken and copied them and pasted them down here because I want to show you a pattern brush. The theme of the day is knowing functions in Illustrator helps you save time and helps you do things perfectly. And you should want to be doing both as much as possible to write papers as quickly as possible. So, for example, the reason I want to show you this is because if you wanted to have a biological drawing and you're showing we have cells lining a blood vessel like endothelial cells, what do most students try and do? Well, they say, well, I know I can make a circle, so I'll start there. And then I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to copy him, let's zoom in, I'm going to rotate, I'm going to put him about there, copy, rotate, put him about there, and they'll continue doing this, the whole circumference of the circle, of the vessel in this case. It's slow, it's not perfect. If you wanted to change the shape of this blood vessel, if you say, yeah, make it 25% bigger, you're like, crap, I gotta respace everything, I gotta realign these things to the vessel, this is really inconvenient. But what if I told you there's a way to perfectly do it every single time at the drop of a hat? All you have to do is make what's called a pattern brush. So I've got my endothelial cell. Let's come down here. We can even make this guy, double click to get into the group. We'll make him like pink. Who cares? I want to show that we can make this bespoke. We will make a separate vessel. I can even come in here to the appearances and reset the appearance just because it doesn't matter. Even give it a little stroke so I can see it. I will come and I will highlight the endothelial cell, make sure it's grouped together. And then I will come over to brushes, which is, looks like a bunch of paintbrushes in a little can. And I'm going to select this guy and I'm going to drag him on over and it will bring up this new menu. Scatter brush will be selected by default, but that is not what you want. Scatter brushes are for like if I had this symbol and I held down the brush, it would like fling the endothelial cell randomly everywhere if you wanted to. Again, that's what designers need. That's not what scientists need. I come down to pattern brush and I click OK. And then it brings up this option. Again, pretty extensive panel. What I want you to know about most is for the corner tiles, I want you to do auto between. So again, come out of this drop-down menu on the first blob that you see, auto between as opposed to what it was before. We'll click OK. And then what we will do, we'll highlight the circle. That's going to be my blood vessel. You'll see I've got that new pattern brush down here. And if I just click, all I've done is I've basically replaced the stroke in effect, or I've at least put a brush around that perimeter. So lo and behold, it's perfect. I don't have to go through, and it's even arced these cells a little bit for me so that they're perfectly touching. I don't really have to do anything. It took me 10 seconds. The only thing that I needed to do was know that it existed, and lo and behold, it's live. It is auto updating and interpolating these cells. So if your advisor comes back and says, let's make, a second layer, you say, no problem. I understand how to work non-destructively in Illustrator. Copy, paste in place, scale from the center, hold Alt and Shift, auto updates. Now I've got two concentric endothelial cell linings, and maybe this one, I can come in here, maybe I want to change that color, and I just make a separate pattern brush and I change that color, or I have it be a different thing. But understanding, working non-destructively, moving in orthogonal increments, all these little things like pattern brushes, blend tool, different types of transformations, how to map things, all these things will make you really effective as a scientist when it comes to making figures in Illustrator. There's going to be growing pains. You're gonna have to learn and remember certain things. There's tons of commands. I understand that. What I also have, for example, in my template for anyone in either our lab or our company is on my template. What do? I've already made a useful hotkeys layer that if someone they're learning and they're thinking, oh, what was paste in front, or what was swap, stroke, and fill, they come over to the useful Illustrator hotkeys and they're able to just see it immediately. Oh, it's Shift X. And what do they need to do? Hide that layer, go back to what they were working on. Turn on visibility, you're good to go. On top of that, so it's not just hotkeys. Again, say I'm making a figure, I've got a new microscope image from a confocal microscope of a cell. How does my lab, how does my professor, my PI like to make a figure? Well, I got the style guide. I come in here, oh, okay, so we like to have this arrangement. We like to say actin is green, nuclei is blue. I will copy that from the style guide. I will hide it, come back and select the layer that I'm working on. Heck, let's actually go to the working layer. Let's turn that on. I can paste in place, will be over here. And then I know through the alignment tool, I'll group these. I can even align it to the center of the artboard, at the top of the artboard, move it around really quickly, remembering the align tool, snapping things immediately. You can fly, you can move really, really quickly. So you're saying, oh, I got this picture, I know it's dropped in here. We've got, we know that we like this as our panel. Come back to the working layer, paste in place, move that over, and then drop that in, snap this, click, boom, boom, done. And you can crop this however you want it, whatever you want to do. Then group that. So with that, I hope that was helpful. I think there's a huge difference in terms of what scientists and young professors and heck, even more established professors can do and know about in Adobe Illustrator. With that, I think you'll be able to start flying around, making figures way faster. You'll be able to scrub through and find any segment I may have gone through a little bit quickly. Again, learn hotkeys, use a mouse, work non-destructively, use layers, move in orthogonal increments. Thank you so much. Give this a like, a thumbs up, and share it with your lab or anyone who you think it's useful for. Took a while to make, took a while to learn in terms of compiling these and actually getting into a lesson. With that, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.